I always assumed that after 52 years with the same man, there wasn't a corner of him left unexplored. You grow up together, you grow old together, you weather storms you didn't expect, and you build a life brick by brick until you can't tell where you end and the other person begins. That was marriage to me. That was what Thomas and I had. Or so I believed. Sometimes when I look back at those years now, it feels like flipping through a photo album someone else arranged. The pictures are familiar, but the meaning behind them shifts, almost like they were rewritten when I wasn't looking. Maybe that's what truth does. It changes the story even when the images stay the same. The morning of the funeral felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Not just sad, not just heavy. It felt like the air itself was trying to warn me. A quiet, pressing discomfort wrapped around my chest, whispering that something was coming. Something I wasn't prepared for. But when you're grieving, you don't trust your instincts. You barely trust yourself. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I needed to, smoothing the fabric of my black dress. My hands trembled as I tried to attach the pearl earrings Thomas had bought me for our 25th anniversary. They used to make me smile. That morning, they only hurt. Every memory felt sharp, like brushing against the edge of a broken plate. I steadied myself with a long breath. "You did your best," I whispered, not sure if I meant it for him or for me. I didn't look like myself. My face seemed older, the sadness pulling everything down. My eyes, my mouth, even my posture. Grief steals years like a thief in the night. I touched the small line between my brows, a line Thomas used to smooth with his thumb whenever I was worried. A tremble moved through me again. It was strange to know I'd never feel that gesture again. Never hear him call my name from across the room. Never wake up to the sound of him humming while he made breakfast. The silence in that room was too still. It didn't feel like normal quiet. It felt deliberate, like something holding its breath. Maybe that was the first warning. But back then, I told myself it was just the ache of losing him. Just the weight of being alone. The church parking lot was already half full when I arrived. People dressed in black walked quietly up the stone steps. Some of them I recognized, others I didn't. Funerals have a way of drawing everyone out. Loved ones, friends, old co-workers you forgot existed, even people who barely knew the deceased but came because something nudged them to. It's strange how death collects people like that. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and old wood. The mixture reminded me of my mother's funeral, a scent I never wanted to remember. But there it was, clinging to everything. The pews filled one by one, low murmurs rising and falling like soft waves. Every now and then someone approached me, taking my hands with that sad head tilt people do when they don't know what to say. "I'm so sorry. He was such a good man. He loved you so much." Each phrase felt like another stone laid on my chest. But then, as I turned to take my seat, my eyes drifted toward the back of the church, and that's when I saw her. She sat alone on the last pew, slightly turned away from the crowd. A dark blue dress, not black like everyone else, hugged her small frame. Her shoulders were tense, her posture almost protective. And though the rest of the congregation carried an air of solemnity, hers felt heavier, deeper, almost raw. But it was her face that caught me. Her eyes were red and puffy, the kind of red that comes from hours of crying, not minutes. She clasped her hands so tightly in her lap that her knuckles looked strained. There was grief on her face, not polite mourning, but the kind that shakes your soul. The kind that comes from losing someone woven into the fabric of your life. A chill stumbled down my spine. Something about her hit me wrong. Not because she looked out of place, but because she didn't. I tried tearing my eyes away. It was a funeral. Emotions ran high. People cried, people mourned. But as I turned forward, a strange tug pulled me back. And that's when I noticed the boy sitting beside her. Maybe 12. Maybe 13. His curly hair was slightly messy, like someone rushed him out of the house. He wore a simple white shirt tucked into black slacks, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. His eyes. God, his eyes. Deep brown. Focused. Gentle. The same shade Thomas had. I blinked hard, shaking the thought away. Grief plays tricks, I told myself. It makes you see patterns where there aren't any. It makes familiar features jump out at you. But then the boy lifted his hand and wiped a tear off his cheek, the same quick swipe Thomas always did, like he was embarrassed to be seen crying. My stomach twisted so violently I nearly reached for the pew. No, this was nothing. Coincidence. Nothing more. I forced myself to sit, forced my breathing into a steady rhythm. But my eyes kept drifting back despite every attempt to look anywhere else. The woman leaned close to the boy, whispering something in his ear, a tender touch on his shoulder. The way she held him, the way he leaned into her. They weren't strangers here. They weren't casual attendees. They felt connected to my husband. That thought alone felt like betrayal. During the first hymn, my voice cracked. I couldn't focus on the words. I kept feeling her eyes on me, even though when I glanced back, she was staring at the front, at the framed photograph of Thomas on the stand by the casket. Staring the way a woman stares at someone she loves. Someone she's lost. If I had known who she really was in that moment, I think my knees would have buckled right there. The pastor stepped forward, clearing his throat, and I straightened up automatically. He began with the usual words: comfort, memories, faith, loss. But something about his tone felt rehearsed, distant. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was me. Everything sounded muffled, like I was underwater. Thomas was a devoted husband and a loving man, he said. That sentence, it echoed in the hollow space of my chest. A devoted husband. I should have felt warmth at that. Pride. Gratitude. But instead, a strange tightness wrapped around my ribs. Why did the woman in the back flinch slightly when he said those words? Why did the boy look down at the floor as if he didn't want to hear it? The pastor continued, telling small stories people had shared. Fishing trips, old jokes from the hardware store, the time Thomas rescued a neighbor's dog. Everyone chuckled softly at the lighter moments, the way you do at funerals to soften the blow. But I wasn't listening anymore. Not really. My eyes kept returning to her. She wasn't looking around like everyone else. She wasn't greeting people or nodding politely. She was staring straight at the casket. And her expression said one thing, clear as day. She knew Thomas. She knew him deeply. She was grieving him like family. Another rehook tugged at me hard, whispering the question I didn't want to ask. Why hadn't I seen her before today? About halfway through the service, my gaze drifted down the boy's wrist, and my breath caught painfully in my throat. Just above the sleeve of his shirt, on the soft skin near his wrist, I saw a small, distinct mark. A faded birthmark. The same shape Thomas had. The same spot. The same color. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I gripped the wooden pew so tightly my hand ached. A wave of heat and cold crashed through me, a feeling so intense I thought I might faint. The world around me blurred, the pastor's voice, the murmurs, the sniffles, everything. All I could see was that birthmark. My mind screamed in denial, but my heart knew. It knew before I did. It recognized what my eyes were seeing even as I tried to fight it. There was no coincidence in that mark. None. Not after 52 years. Not after knowing Thomas's skin better than I knew my own reflection. That boy wasn't just some kid attending a funeral. He wasn't just someone's son. He was Thomas's. I don't know how long I sat frozen like that. Seconds. Minutes. But it felt like time had shifted, like I had stepped out of my life and into someone else's nightmare. I finally forced myself to breathe, but even that felt foreign. My chest trembled with every inhale. I kept telling myself it wasn't what I thought, that I needed more proof, that grief was clouding my judgment. But even as the excuses formed, they felt hollow, empty. Because deep down, beneath all the disbelief, I already knew. And then it happened. The woman lifted her gaze, and our eyes met. Her expression changed instantly. Her face went pale. She looked terrified, not sad, not guilty, not sympathetic. Terrified. Like she knew exactly what I'd figured out. Like she'd been waiting for this moment and dreading it all the same. I turned away fast, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The pastor's voice faded into static. The world tilted, and I pressed a hand to my stomach, feeling nauseous. The rehook, the part that kept swallowing my thoughts whole, was this. If the boy was my husband's son, then who was she? And what else had Thomas kept from me? I didn't know it yet, but the funeral was just the beginning. The truth was waiting outside those church doors, and it was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. I don't remember standing up when the service ended. One moment I was seated, staring blankly at the lilies on the altar, and the next thing I knew, I was moving down the aisle, people touching my arm, whispering soft condolences that dissolved before they reached me. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, stuck on the face of that woman and the boy beside her. The boy with Thomas's birthmark. For a moment, I wondered if I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe my grief had pushed me into a fog where every familiar feature felt like a sign. But grief doesn't draw birthmarks. It doesn't change bone structure. It doesn't give a child your husband's exact eyes. I felt a pressure building inside me. Not anger yet, not sadness, but something quieter and more dangerous. Something like dread blooming slowly in the chest. I stepped outside into the cold afternoon air. Usually, funerals bring people closer. They form circles, they talk, they retell stories. But I walked through the small crowd like a ghost. I don't think I responded to a single person. I just kept walking, needing space. Needing a moment to breathe without feeling like I was suffocating on my own thoughts. But as I neared the edge of the parking lot, something made me stop. A gentle tug. A whisper. Some internal instinct that said, "Turn around." I did. And there they were, the woman and the boy. They stood near the stone steps of the church, slightly away from the rest of the mourners. She held his hand tightly, like she was afraid he'd slip away or run. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot, glancing around like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. I froze. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She wasn't comforting her son. Her eyes were locked on me. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't pity. It was fear. A quick, sharp fear buried behind trembling lashes. She lifted her other hand slowly, almost hesitantly, and gave me the smallest nod. It was a fragile motion, like she was unsure she had the right to gesture toward me at all. I felt my stomach twist again. Why would she be afraid of me? Why would she be hesitant? Unless she knew I had seen the resemblance. Unless she knew I had realized who the boy was. My mind was spiraling, and I couldn't stop it. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my face neutral. I didn't want her to know how shaken I was. Not yet. I needed answers before emotions took over. But I wasn't the only one approaching her. Thomas's sister, Eleanor, stepped into my path suddenly, grabbing my hands in both of hers. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "You holding up?" I blinked, pulled back into the present. "Trying," I said faintly. She studied my face with the soft, knowing look only older sisters have. But behind her eyes, something flickered. Something uneasy. Like she sensed a storm gathering around me. "Let's get you something to eat at the reception," she said softly. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I wanted to say I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to speak to that woman, to understand what was going on before the moment slipped away. But before I could form the words, Eleanor followed my gaze. Her eyes landed on the woman and the boy. Her expression stiffened. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to notice. When she looked back at me, her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Come on. Let's go inside." I stared at her. "Do you know them?" I asked. Her reaction was too quick. No. A lie. I knew her voice too well. I'd known it for 5 decades. Before I could press further, she squeezed my arm gently. Today isn't the day for questions, she whispered, as if offering comfort. But her tone wasn't comforting. It was pleading. My breath caught as the rehook tightened around my ribs. Why wouldn't today be the day for questions? What was she afraid I would find out? I watched Eleanor walk away, but I didn't follow. I couldn't. My feet felt cemented to the ground. My pulse was pounding in my ears. My eyes drifted back toward the woman, but she was already pulling the boy toward the parking lot. She was leaving. No, she wasn't leaving before I got answers. I moved quickly, almost tripping over my own shoes as I made my way toward them. People turned to look at me, a grieving widow moving with sudden urgency, but I didn't care. The woman saw me approaching and froze. Her entire body tensed, like prey cornered by a predator. She clutched the boy's hand tighter. He looked up at her, confused and slightly scared. I slowed down when I reached them, not wanting to frighten the child. My voice came out softer than I felt inside. Excuse me. The woman swallowed hard. Up close, she was younger than me. Early 40s, maybe. Tall, with soft features and tired, haunted eyes. She wasn't wearing makeup. Tears had washed away anything she might have put on earlier. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, strands falling around her face. She looked like a woman trying to keep herself together after losing something, or someone, important. I looked at the boy. He stared at me with curiosity mixed with discomfort. Children sense tension before adults do. I cleared my throat. I'm sorry. My voice cracked. I steadied it. How did you know my husband? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she might run. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The boy shifted uncomfortably and tugged her sleeve. Mom, he whispered quietly, and something inside me split open. Mom. Not sister. Not aunt. Not guardian. Mom. My heart thudded painfully. She finally spoke, her voice almost too soft to hear. I didn't mean to cause you pain. Truly. That alone made my knees weaken. Cause me pain. Why would she expect that? Unless. I forced myself to ask it. Who is he? I whispered, nodding at the boy even though my voice nearly failed me. Her eyes filled instantly with fresh tears. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I'm sorry, she choked. I wanted to come earlier. I wanted to tell you. But I didn't know how. Not like this. The ground felt like it tilted under me. Tell me what? My voice was barely more than a hiss, pushed through clenched teeth. The woman's hand fell to her side. Her gaze dropped to the pavement. He's Thomas's son, she whispered. Time stopped. Not slowed. Not blurred. Stopped. I felt my breath vanish. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might collapse right there. The world around me went silent, every conversation, every car passing, every cough, every rustle of wind. All gone. Just the woman's voice echoing in the hollow place inside me. He's Thomas's son. All the air I tried to inhale came out as a shaky exhale that didn't give me any relief. How? I whispered, barely able to form the word. How long? She wiped her cheeks with the back of her trembling hand. 12 years. My head jerked. 12. You mean? Yes, she said quietly, nodding. He's 12. Almost 13. My stomach churned. That meant Thomas had cheated on me 13 years ago. In our 60s. After retirement. After promising me we'd grow old together peacefully. I felt something inside me break. Something that had taken decades to build. I stared at the boy again. He looked so nervous. So confused. So unaware of the way his existence had just shattered my entire life. I turned back to her. How did you meet him? My voice was hollow. She hesitated, looking down. He volunteered at the youth center where I worked. I was younger. And vulnerable. He said he was lonely. That his marriage wasn't the same. That his wife didn't. She stopped, trembling harder. I'm sorry. I should have known better. Her words stabbed deeper than she could ever understand. His marriage wasn't the same. His wife didn't. What? Didn't love him? Didn't understand him? Or was that just what men say to justify betrayal? My vision blurred for a moment. I blinked hard, swallowing back the tight burn of tears. You should have told me, I whispered. Her voice cracked. I tried. I did. But he made me promise not to. He said it would destroy you. He said he would tell you himself one day. She shook her head. He never did. Of course he didn't. Cowards never do. My mouth felt dry. And you came today? To the funeral. I came so he could say goodbye, she whispered, glancing at her son. And so you could finally know the truth. The boy raised his head, and our eyes met. For a split second, something in his gaze softened. He didn't know what was happening, not fully, but he could sense the pain. Kids always can. He took a small step forward. Did you know my dad well? He asked quietly, innocent curiosity threading through the question. The words pierced me so violently I almost gasped, why Dad? I had to look away. Yes, I whispered, voice cracking. I knew him better than anyone. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true anymore. Before anything else could be said, Eleanor's voice came sharply from behind me. Mary. I turned. She was hurrying toward us. Panic splashed across her face. True panic, not grief. Come with me, she urged, grabbing my elbow. I pulled back. Did you know? Her mouth snapped shut. And in that moment, that tiny, fleeting pause, I got my answer. I stared at her, feeling the final rehook of the moment slam into my chest. They hadn't just kept his secret. They'd kept mine too. My entire marriage. My entire life. Built on a lie everyone else seemed to already know. I turned back toward the woman and her son, but they were walking away, hurriedly, as if compelled by Eleanor's presence. I opened my mouth to call after them, but I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't speak. The truth had finally found me, and it wasn't done with me yet. The hours after the funeral felt like moving through a world made of thick glass. Everything sounded muffled, distorted. People's hands were on me, guiding me, touching my arms, telling me it would be okay, but their voices drifted around me like distant echoes. I couldn't tell who was speaking or what they were saying. I just kept nodding because I didn't know what else to do. Inside the reception hall, chairs scraped across the floor, soft organ music played from an old speaker, and the smell of deviled eggs and casseroles filled the air. It was supposed to be comforting. It felt suffocating instead. People approached me with stories, with laughter held tightly in their throats, with forced smiles, all trying to remember Thomas for the man they believed him to be. Every word slid off me like water off glass. Nothing stuck. Nothing meant anything anymore. I kept glancing toward the church doors, half expecting the woman and the boy to reappear, half hoping they would so I could hear something, anything, that could explain the years of deceit sewn into my marriage. But they didn't return. And with every minute that passed, an ache grew deeper in my stomach, sharper, heavier. An ache that whispered, "You don't even know the full story yet." I found myself staring at a framed picture of Thomas on a table near the punch bowl. It was from our 40th anniversary. He had his arm wrapped around my waist. I remembered the warmth of his hand, the softness in his voice when he told me how beautiful I looked. But those memories felt tainted now, like they belonged to someone else. Someone who hadn't been married to a liar. Someone who hadn't been played like a fool. "Mary," a voice said gently. I turned to see Pastor Mitchell standing beside me. His white hair looked even whiter in the fluorescent lighting, and the soft wrinkles around his eyes deepened with concern. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I almost laughed. How does one answer that when their marriage is actively falling apart even after the man is dead? Instead, I whispered, I don't know. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he let on. You know, he began softly, Thomas always spoke highly of you. I flinched at the past tense, at the idea that he always spoke highly, while also secretly fathering a child outside our marriage. The contradiction felt like fire under my skin. Before I could respond, Eleanor appeared again, her expression tight. She inserted herself between us with a polite smile. I'm stealing her for a moment, she said, looping her arm through mine. I opened my mouth to protest, but she pulled me away firmly, leaving the pastor standing there, confused. She guided me toward a quieter hallway near the coat racks. I need to talk to you, she whispered urgently. I yanked my arm free. No, I said, breathing unsteady. I need answers. And you're going to give them to me. Her face tightened. This isn't the place. My voice cracked. It's the only place I have right now. She looked away, jaw clenched, her nails digging into her palms. I'd known her for 50 years, and I'd never seen her look so cornered. I stepped closer. You knew, didn't you? I whispered. Her eyes closed briefly. That was enough of an answer. How long? I asked. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. Mary, please. How long? I repeated, louder this time. A few people glanced over. I lowered my voice with effort. Tell me the truth, Eleanor. I deserve at least that. She looked up at me with eyes full of guilt. 12 years. The words hit harder than I expected. It felt like a sharp blow to the chest. I pressed a hand to my stomach to steady myself. You knew he had a child, I whispered. You knew he had another family. She shook her head vigorously. No, not a family. Not like that. He made mistakes, yes. Mistakes. My voice rose again, trembling. A child is not a mistake. A child is a life. A responsibility. A truth he chose to hide from me. Eleanor's eyes shimmered with tears. He was ashamed. He didn't know how to tell you. He loved you, Mary. Loved me. I felt my lips curl in disbelief. He lied to me for over a decade. He was trying to protect you, she whispered. I stared at her, stunned by the ridiculousness of the statement. Protect me from what? The truth. She didn't respond. And that silence, that heavy telling silence, shattered something inside me that I didn't know could still break. My voice softened, but the hurt in it felt sharp as glass. Why didn't you tell me? I promised him, she whispered. He swore he'd tell you himself one day. I laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. Well, he ran out of days. Eleanor didn't speak. She didn't need to. The guilt on her face said enough. I stepped back from her, suddenly desperate for air. The room felt too small. The walls pressed in around me. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I need to be alone, I whispered. Mary, she began, reaching for my arm. I pulled away sharply. Don't. Please. Just don't. And then I walked out the side door of the hall, letting the cold wind hit me like a slap. It was sharp enough to sting, but the pain grounded me. I sucked in a deep breath, then another, trying to calm the hurricane spiraling inside my chest. For a few minutes, I just stood there, staring at the empty churchyard, listening to the distant murmur of voices. Tears blurred my vision, but I wiped them away quickly. I didn't want to cry. Not now. Not over him. Not over the lies. But as I turned to head toward my car, a voice called behind me. Mrs. Hayes. I froze. The voice was small. Young. I turned slowly. The boy stood there, hands tucked awkwardly into the pockets of his black slacks. He looked nervous, shifting his weight, glancing back toward the street as if making sure his mother wasn't watching. My breath faltered. He stepped forward cautiously. I'm sorry, he whispered. The simplest words. But they pierced deeper than anything Eleanor had said. I swallowed hard. You don't need to apologize, I murmured, my voice softening involuntarily. None of this is your fault. He nodded, though his eyes didn't fully believe it. My mom, she didn't want to come inside the hall, he said, glancing around nervously. She said it wasn't our place. His place. The son of my husband. My heart twisted painfully. What's your name? I asked gently. He hesitated. Matthew. My breath caught. That was Thomas's middle name. Of course it was. The rehook tugged painfully now. Every answer only led to more questions. I crouched slightly so our eyes were level. Matthew, I murmured. Why did you come talk to me? He bit his lip, a gesture so painfully familiar I had to steady myself. Because you looked sad. And my dad always said. He paused, swallowing. He said you were the bravest person he ever knew. A sharp, involuntary sound escaped me. Part sob, part laugh. He said that. I whispered. Matthew nodded quickly. He talked about you a lot. He said you were strong, and that you took care of him, and that you two were together forever. His voice softened. He said he wished things were different. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Matthew noticed and his face fell. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I shook my head. No, please don't be. None of this is your doing. He softened. Are you mad at my mom? I blinked, startled by the question. No, I said slowly. I'm angry at your father. Not your mother. Not you. He nodded a little, relief washing over his small features. Okay, he whispered. Just then, his mother's voice called from across the parking lot. Matthew. He looked over his shoulder. I have to go. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. He took a few steps away, then turned back. I hope, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I hope you're okay someday. Then he ran off toward his mother. I stood there long after they were gone, the wind brushing against my face, carrying his words with it like soft echoes. I hope you're okay someday. But I wasn't okay. Not even close. Because the deeper rehook was clear now, painfully clear. Thomas didn't just hide a child. He hid a part of himself. A part that was still out there. And if he hid one secret for 12 years, what else had he hidden? For the next few days, the house felt like a museum dedicated to a man I wasn't sure I'd ever truly known. Every corner, every picture frame, every piece of furniture tugged at a memory. Good ones, bad ones, ordinary ones that should have brought comfort but instead wrapped themselves around my chest like vines, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I avoided our bedroom for 2 full days. I slept in the guest room with the door half open, listening to the creaks of the old house shift at night, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets they'd kept for years. I didn't trust myself to sleep where he slept. Not yet. That bed now felt like a lie. The biggest one of all. People kept dropping off casseroles and flowers, offering hugs I wasn't ready for. I thanked them, I smiled where appropriate, but the entire time I felt like a hollowed-out version of myself, a woman wearing my face but not living my life. Every time someone said, "You two had such a beautiful marriage," I felt my stomach twist. Their words felt like shards of glass I had to swallow politely. On the 4th day after the funeral, the house finally fell silent. No visitors. No ringing phone. No sympathetic voices. Just me. Just quiet. Just questions. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the last cold cup of coffee I hadn't touched. I didn't know where to start, with the anger, with the betrayal, with the grief, or with the boy whose face kept flashing in my mind. Matthew. His small voice. His nervous smile. His father's eyes. How do you grieve a man and hate him at the same time? How do you mourn someone who belonged to you, and didn't? A soft knock pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. For a moment, fear struck me, irrational and abrupt, because the last knock that changed my life had come at the funeral. Because I didn't know if I could handle another truth knocking at my door. I hesitated before opening it. It was Eleanor. Her eyes were puffy, her hair not done for the first time in years, and she held a Tupperware container like she needed an excuse to show up. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside without a word. She placed the container on the counter and stood there awkwardly, wringing her hands like a child waiting to be scolded. "I'm sorry," she started, voice cracking almost immediately. "I didn't know how to tell you. Thomas begged me not to." I leaned against the counter, arms folded tightly across my chest. He begged my sister-in-law to protect his secret, not his wife. She flinched. "I thought," she swallowed. "I thought he would tell you before anything happened to him. He said he was working up the courage." I laughed bitterly. The courage. He had 12 years to grow it. She didn't argue. She didn't defend him. She just let her tears fall, maybe for him, maybe for herself. "He loved you," she whispered. "Whatever he did, whatever mistake he made, he loved you until the very end." I shook my head. Loving someone doesn't give you permission to break them. We stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, she wiped her eyes. "There's something you need to know." My stomach tightened. Another secret. Her lips trembled. He wasn't planning on keeping Matthew a secret forever. He wanted to bring him into the family. Slowly. Carefully. He was terrified of hurting you. "Too late," I whispered. "But he was trying," she said. "He had papers, letters, things he'd written. He kept them in his workshop in the shed." My heart dropped. Thomas's workshop. The place he had told me never to clean, never to rearrange. The place that always smelled like sawdust and old varnish. The place I thought was just his escape, not his hiding place. Eleanor placed her trembling hand on mine. "You deserve the truth. Even the parts he couldn't give you." And then she stepped back, leaving me with one final rehook. "Go look," she said softly, "before someone else does." She left, closing the door quietly behind her. I didn't move for nearly a minute. Just stood there, breath shallow, pulse pounding. The shed. Was I ready for whatever I'd find? What if it shattered everything I still thought I knew? What if it proved Thomas was more than the betrayal? Or worse than it? I finally exhaled shakily. I needed to know. The shed sat behind the house, tucked beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Thomas had always kept it locked. At first, it made sense. Tools, saws, dangerous equipment. But later, after he started disappearing for volunteer shifts at the youth center, I noticed he guarded the shed more carefully. He locked it twice. He checked the door more often than usual. I hadn't thought anything of it then. Now it felt obvious. I grabbed the spare key from the kitchen drawer. He never knew I found his hiding spot years ago, and made my way outside. The air was cool, the sky gray with the kind of clouds that look heavy enough to burst. The grass crunched quietly under my shoes. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. I reached the shed door, hand shaking so badly that the key rattled when I tried to insert it. I steadied myself, inhaled slowly, and turned the lock. It clicked open with a small metallic sigh. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Old wood, oil, dust, and something else. Something I couldn't name but struck me with strange familiarity. It smelled like guilt and secrets. Like time frozen. Sunlight filtered through the small window, revealing a workbench cluttered with wood shavings. His favorite tools still rested in their usual spots. His old flannel jacket hung on the back of the chair. I walked slowly, running my fingers lightly across the surface of the bench. My hand landed on a small wooden carving, a half-finished toy boat. Thomas had made dozens of these when we were younger, always gifting them to neighbors, children, anyone who seemed to need a smile. But this one looked different. Newer. Made recently. For who? I didn't need to ask. My eyes drifted to the corner of the shed, a metal lockbox sitting under the window. It was one of those heavy-duty ones, the kind he used to store our important documents. But he never told me he kept one out here. My heartbeat quickened. The lockbox wasn't dusty, which meant it had been opened recently. My hands trembled as I crouched down and pulled it toward me. It was heavy. Not physically, emotionally. Heavy with potential truths. Heavy with the weight of all the nights I'd slept beside him unaware that he'd lived a second life. I opened the box. Inside were stacks of envelopes. Some sealed. Some torn open. Some tied together with a string. I lifted the first bundle. My name written on the top envelope in his handwriting. For Mary. I felt something collapse inside me. It took everything in me not to break down, not to crumble right there on the shed floor. I opened the first letter with shaking hands. My love. If you're reading this, then I never found the courage to tell you myself. Each word cut deeper. I have a son. My breath caught, but I kept reading. He's not the result of what you fear. It was not a love affair. It was a mistake born from loneliness and guilt after your illness. When I felt you slipping away, my heart pounded painfully. I remembered that year. My surgery, the complications, the months when I was too weak to do anything but sleep. He sat beside me every day. Or so I thought. He continued. It happened once. One night I regretted the moment it was over. I never loved her. She didn't want anything from me except honesty, and I failed at that too. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want that night to take away everything we built. You are my life, Mary. You always were. I shook my head. Then why? I whispered aloud. Why did you lie for 12 years? The letter didn't answer. But the next one did. I opened it, my breath uneven. Our son is 12 now. Our son. The phrase stabbed like a knife. I've been helping from a distance. Paying for school supplies. Medical bills. Things she couldn't cover alone. But I never let myself be his father. I was too afraid of losing you. I closed my eyes. Another letter. I'm trying to do right by him. I know it's not enough. I know I should have told you. Eleanor begged me to. But I was a coward. A lump formed in my throat. There were more letters. Dozens. Some unfinished. Some scrapped. Some torn up and retaped. A man fighting with himself. A man torn between guilt and love. A man who wanted to be good but didn't know how to fix the damage he created. Among them, I found a photograph. Matthew. Smiling shyly at a school event. Holding a soccer trophy. Thomas stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. The photo blurred instantly from my tears. He wasn't a stranger to the boy. He wasn't a distant donor. He was a father. Emotion swallowed my breath, a strange mix of rage, heartbreak, betrayal, and something I didn't expect. Compassion. Because for the first time, I saw the full truth. Thomas didn't choose another family over me. He didn't build a second life intentionally. He was a flawed man who made a devastating mistake and spent 12 years drowning in guilt. But the rehook hit me again, sharp and insistent. If he planned to tell me, why did he never get the chance? A sudden thought hit me so hard I almost gasped. What if he didn't die the way we thought he did? I clutched the photograph tightly. There were more answers. More letters. More secrets buried beneath his guilt. And I wasn't leaving that shed until I uncovered them all. I stayed in that shed longer than I intended. Maybe hours. The cold crept into my bones, but I barely felt it. My hands shook as I sifted through the letters, each one revealing a piece of a man I thought I knew. A man who had lived a second life quietly, shamefully, fearfully, but not maliciously. Still, the betrayal hurt. It tore through every memory I had of us. When I finally stepped out of the shed, clutching a handful of letters to my chest, the sky was dark. The air had shifted. There was a weight to the wind that felt like a warning, like the truth wasn't done with me yet. I locked the shed door and walked back toward the house, each step heavy. I felt older than I had that morning. Older than the last 3 days combined. Inside, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I set the letters on the kitchen table and stared at them, trying to decide whether to keep going or stop before I unraveled the last threads of the life I once believed in. But curiosity has a way of pulling you deeper, especially when mixed with pain. I reached for another letter, this one sealed. The envelope had been tucked at the very bottom of the lockbox, hidden beneath financial papers and a few old receipts. It was addressed to me. The handwriting was shaky, like he'd written it late at night or in a moment of weakness. My love. If something happens to me, please don't blame her. Don't blame Matthew. Blame me. Only me. I never meant for things to spiral the way they did. There's something you don't know. I froze. Something I don't know? My hands tightened around the paper. Someone has been following me. A chill rippled down my spine. I scanned the words again, heart thudding. I think I made a mistake. A bigger one than the night Matthew was conceived. I've been trying to fix it quietly, but I'm not sure I can anymore. I don't want you or Matthew or anyone else to get hurt because of me. My breath caught. I need to talk to the woman. The one I wronged. The one who could destroy everything if she wanted to. But she hasn't. Not yet. I must make this right. Not the woman I've been seeing. Another woman. I lowered the letter slowly. Another woman. Not Matthew's mother. Not the youth center worker. Someone else. My heart hammered in confusion and fear. What had he done? What had he been involved in? There was more. If I don't fix this, I'm afraid it might kill me. I'm afraid it might hurt you too. I'm meeting her soon to settle things. If something happens, please believe that I tried. I stared at the last line. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of leaving this world with you thinking I stopped loving you. A sob escaped before I could stop it. The grief and anger and confusion tangled together until I didn't know what emotion belonged to what moment. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a man scared for his life. And he died of a sudden heart attack. Except now I wasn't sure. The rehook squeezed around my ribs. What if Thomas didn't die naturally? What if his death wasn't an accident at all? My breath trembled. I pressed the letter against my chest and tried to steady myself. I needed to talk to someone. But not Eleanor. She already proved she'd kept too much from me. No. I needed someone who didn't know the truth. Someone who wouldn't lie to protect Thomas. I needed Sheriff Watkins. He had been at the funeral. He had hugged me with the soft sympathy only a man raised in a small town can offer. He'd known Thomas for years. If the sheriff knew anything, or even suspected something, he might help piece together what really happened. But before I could reach for the phone, another knock sounded at the door. I stiffened. Late. Too late for visitors. Too late for casseroles or sympathy. A chill tiptoed up my spine. I hesitated, stepping slowly toward the door. I didn't open it right away. I peeked through the side curtain first. It was Matthew. Standing alone on my porch. My heart lurched painfully. I opened the door quickly. Matthew. Honey, what are you doing here? Where's your mother? His cheeks were red from the cold, his jacket too thin for the dropping temperature. His eyes were wide, nervous, scared. I ran away, he whispered. I felt my chest collapse inward. Why? What happened? He swallowed hard, looking over his shoulder like someone might appear from the darkness. She's mad, he whispered. She said we shouldn't have talked to you. She said it made everything dangerous. A shot of fear pulsed through me. Dangerous? How? He shook his head. I don't know. She just packed our bags and said we had to leave town tonight. She said someone was watching us. A cold wave washed over me. Someone was watching us. The same thing Thomas wrote about in the letter. I knelt down slowly so we were eye level. Where is your mom now? I don't know, he whispered. I ran before she could lock the door. My mouth went dry. Matthew, did your dad ever tell you about someone following him? His lips parted, but he hesitated. He told Mom, he admitted quietly. He said a woman was angry at him. Really angry. He said he messed something up and needed to fix it before she did something crazy. My heart thundered. This wasn't about an affair anymore. Not just about cheating. Not about shame or fear of hurting me. This was bigger. Darker. Dangerous. What woman? I whispered. Matthew shook his head helplessly. I don't know. Dad wouldn't say her name. Mom said it wasn't our business. They thought it would calm down on its own. But it hadn't. It had gotten worse. The wind howled suddenly, and Matthew flinched. He looked so small on that porch. So breakable. So scared. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. You're safe here. Come inside. He nodded and stepped in hesitantly. I closed the door behind him, but the lock felt too flimsy, too meaningless in that moment. We went into the living room. I wrapped him in an old quilt and made him sit on the couch. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Do you want something warm to drink? I asked softly. He nodded. As I heated milk on the stove, I watched him from the corner of my eye. His small hands trembled. His gaze darted around the room like he was expecting someone to barge in. It broke me. It genuinely broke me. A child shouldn't know fear like that. When I placed the mug in his hands, he whispered a tiny, "Thank you." I sat beside him in silence for a moment. Then I asked, "Matthew, why did you come here tonight? Why not go to your aunt's house or a friend's?" His answer nearly stopped my heart. Because Dad said if anything ever happened, you were the safest person for me. Everything inside me crumbled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could barely think. He said you were the only one he trusted, Matthew whispered. He said you were the bravest woman he knew. I covered my mouth as tears spilled over. Not because I forgave Thomas. Not because the betrayal disappeared. But because those words, those beautiful, painful words, meant he still loved me despite everything he'd done. Matthew's voice shook. And now my mom is gone. Someone took her. The room spun. What? I whispered. She was yelling on the phone, he said. She kept saying, "Leave us alone. We're done. He's gone." Then she screamed, and I heard something fall. When I ran into the room, she wasn't there. The back door was open. I gripped the arm of the couch hard. Someone had taken her. Because of Thomas. Because of whatever he got involved in. My pulse raced. Matthew looked at me with terrified eyes. Is someone going to take me too? I pulled him into my arms without hesitation. No, I whispered fiercely. No, nobody is taking you. You're safe here. But inside, fear clawed at me. Someone was watching Thomas. Someone was following him. Someone wanted something from him. And now they had taken the mother of his son. Matthew clung to me, trembling. I held him tightly. I don't know what's happening, he whispered. But I think my dad knew he was in danger. So did I. Now more than ever. The rehook tightened in my chest. Thomas didn't just hide a son. He died trying to hide a secret that someone would kill for. And now that person wanted something from me. Or from Matthew. Or from both of us. I held him tighter as another realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. Whoever took his mother might be the one who killed my husband. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Matthew drifted off on the couch sometime after midnight, wrapped in quilts, his small hands still trembling even in sleep. I sat beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, praying silently that whatever monster had taken his mother wouldn't come looking for him next. The house was dark except for the dim lamp near the window. Shadows stretched across the walls like quiet reminders that nothing was safe anymore. Every sound made me jump, every creak, every gust of wind, every shifting branch outside. I held Thomas's letters in my lap, reading and rereading every word until the ink felt engraved into my mind. Someone is following me. I made a bigger mistake than the one that created Matthew. I'm meeting her soon. If something happens to me. If. The word echoed through me long after I'd folded the letter back into its envelope. When the sun finally broke through the grey sky, I stood up slowly, joints stiff, heart heavy. I had a choice to make. Hide scared in my house and pray danger didn't come knocking again. Or face the truth head-on, even if it meant finding myself tangled in whatever web Thomas had spun. I looked at Matthew sleeping on the couch, his face soft, unguarded, too innocent for any of this. I wasn't going to let another child pay the price for Thomas's decisions. When he finally stirred awake, the first thing he did was look around in panic, as if afraid his mother still wouldn't be there. I knelt beside him, smoothing his hair gently. "You're safe," I whispered. "I promise." He nodded hesitantly, though the fear in his eyes didn't fade. I gave him something to eat, toast and a scrambled egg, though he barely touched it. His mind was too busy worrying. Mine was too. I waited until he was done pretending to eat before I said the words I'd been avoiding. "Matthew, we need help." He swallowed. "From who?" "The sheriff." His eyes widened. "But what if he says I have to go somewhere else?" "He won't," I reassured him, taking his hand. "I won't let him." He didn't argue. I could tell he wanted someone, anyone, to take charge. He'd been carrying a weight far too heavy for a 12-year-old. I grabbed the letters, folded them into my bag, and helped Matthew put on his jacket. As he tied his shoes, I caught a glimpse of his small wrist, the birthmark. The same one as Thomas. The sight hurt in ways I still couldn't fully understand. The drive to the sheriff's office was quiet. He stared out the window the whole time, barely blinking, clutching the strap of his backpack like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. When we pulled into the lot, I reached over and touched his shoulder gently. "I won't leave you," I said. He nodded, though it felt more like a silent wish than certainty. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and something metallic. Sheriff Watkins sat behind his desk, glasses perched low on his nose, flipping through a stack of papers. He looked up when he saw us. "Mary," he said, standing. "I thought you'd be resting." "I need to talk to you," I said. "Privately." His eyes flicked to Matthew, then back to me. "Of course." He led us into a smaller room, shut the door, and motioned for us to sit. I remained standing. "What's going on?" he asked gently. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter, the one Thomas wrote about someone following him. He took it with a frown and began reading. With every line, his expression tightened. By the time he finished, he set the paper down slowly. "Mary, why am I seeing this for the first time?" "Because Thomas didn't tell anyone. Not me. Not Eleanor." He kept this to himself. The sheriff let out a long, low exhale. "This changes things." Matthew watched us both with wide, frightened eyes. "What do you mean?" I asked. Watkins rubbed his jaw, pacing the small room. "We ruled Thomas's death a heart attack because that's what it looked like. No signs of struggle, no forced entry at the workshop where he collapsed. But," he looked at the letter again, "if someone was involved, we may have missed something." My legs weakened. I grabbed the back of the chair for support. "Sheriff, Matthew's mother was taken last night." The words left my mouth before I even realized I'd said them. His head jerked toward me. "Taken? By who?" Matthew swallowed hard. "She was yelling on the phone. Then she screamed. Someone grabbed her." The sheriff crouched beside Matthew's chair, voice soft but urgent. "Did you see anything? Anyone? A car?" Matthew shook his head violently. "No. I just..." I just heard her scream. The sheriff stood slowly. We need to find her. And fast. I stepped closer. What do you think is going on? He hesitated, a hesitation that chilled me straight through. Mary. I shouldn't say anything until we know more. Say it, I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. Please. He looked at Matthew, then at me. There was a woman reported in town about a year ago. She filed a complaint against Thomas, said he promised her something, then backed out. She claimed he owed her money or compensation for a situation he created. But she never followed through with charges. She just vanished after a while. My mouth dried. What was her name? He flipped through a folder on his desk, brow furrowing. Emily Harper. The name meant nothing to me, but it meant everything in that moment. Matthew's voice trembled. Mom talked to someone named Emily on the phone once. She told her to leave us alone. The room quieted. Sheriff Watkins's jaw tightened. We're not going to assume anything until we investigate, but it's possible this woman reappeared. And if she was angry at your husband, she might blame his son, I whispered. Matthew shrank into his chair. No, Watkins said firmly. We're not going to let anything happen to him. He turned to Matthew again. Son, you'll stay here with Mary for now. You're safe with her. Matthew's terrified eyes flicked to me, and I nodded. But the sheriff wasn't done. Mary, I need you to bring me everything. All the letters. Anything Thomas kept hidden. Anything you found in the shed. I have most of it here, I said, pulling out more envelopes. His eyes widened slightly. That's a lot. I swallowed hard. There's more in the shed. He nodded, determination replacing the earlier hesitation. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'll send a deputy to watch your house. Another to search the shed. And I'm putting an alert out on Emily Harper. Matthew's small voice interrupted. What about my mom? Will you find her? The sheriff knelt again. I promise we will. He didn't promise she'd be safe. He didn't promise she'd come back unharmed. But he promised something. And right then, Matthew needed something. When we left the station, I kept Matthew close. His fingers wrapped around mine the way a child clings to the only stable thing in a crumbling world. The sheriff promised to call the moment he had any new information. At home, I double-checked the locks even though I knew a lock wouldn't stop someone who wanted in badly enough. I made Matthew a sandwich he barely ate. I tried to act calm for him. Tried to make him feel safe. But inside, my heart knotted tighter with every passing minute. By evening, the house felt even heavier. The deputy parked across the street gave me some comfort, but not enough to erase the fear curling through me. Around 9 p.m., the phone rang. I jumped, nearly knocking over my tea. It was Sheriff Watkins. You need to come down to the station, he said. We found her. I swallowed. Matthew's mother? Yes. But she can't talk. My blood ran cold. Is she alive? Yes. Barely. She's beaten, bruised, and terrified. I closed my eyes, tears welling. What happened? We don't know yet. She keeps whispering one word. My heart pounded. What word? He hesitated. Run. My breath caught. Run, he repeated quietly. She keeps saying, we have to run. The rehook slammed into me like a tidal wave. Run from who? Run from what? Run. Before what happens? I grabbed my coat, told Matthew to stay close, and rushed to the car. My pulse hammered with every turn of the steering wheel. When we arrived, a deputy led us to a small room. Matthew clung tightly to my side, trembling. Inside, she lay on a stretcher, Matthew's mother, bruised, crying, barely conscious. Her swollen eyes lifted when we entered. Matthew, she whispered, voice raw. He ran to her, sobbing. I looked at the sheriff, who motioned for silence. She lifted her weak hand, touching her son's face. Tears streamed down both their cheeks. And then she looked at me with a pain that cut deeper than anything I'd ever seen. "It's her," she whispered. "Who?" I asked. Her cracked lips trembled. "Emily," she breathed. "She wants Matthew." My heart stopped. "Why?" I whispered, voice barely there. She stared at me for a long, haunting moment. "Because," she whispered faintly, "Matthew isn't the only secret Thomas left behind." The room spun. My breath vanished. The rehook twisted into something darker. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. "He promised her." Her voice cracked. "He promised her something." Matthew clutched her arm. "Mom, what did Dad promise her?" She cried harder, shaking her head. "He promised her US." A chill tore through me. "Us." I whispered. "What does that mean?" Her next words shattered everything I thought I knew. Emily was pregnant too. The floor dropped from beneath me. Thomas hadn't just left behind one secret. He left behind another child. A child whose mother now wanted Matthew. A child whose existence had driven someone to violence. A child who might be the reason Thomas died. I stared at Matthew, my husband's son, trembling beside his battered mother. And I knew. This wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning of a fight for the children Thomas left behind. And I was the only one left to protect them.